I know Londoners get clowned for not being able to handle the heat, but let me tell you something. London has no business being anything hotter than 25 degrees. And even 25 degrees, I'm being generous. Celsius, yes, Celsius. Anyway, let's talk about double or nothing. And I actually went 9 for 9 on predictions. So to open the main show, we had FTR versus Edge and Christian. New York City street fight, I quit match. If Edge and Christian lost, they would no longer be able to team together as a tag team. Now, let me say, love this match. I love tag team wrestling. One thing that I always laugh at is when wrestlers don't adjust their gear for street fights. It's just comical to me that we have FTR still in their usual trunks. Christian was in his usual gear that has quite a bit of coverage anyway, but only Edge adjusted his gear. He wore some cargo trousers, and I know that it's not an uncommon thing for wrestlers to not adjust their gear for street fights, but I always like when they don't. It makes me giggle. There was a really funny moment when Christian had Cash Wheeler by the crotch with pliers and was making him hop around the ring. That had me cracking up. And then the cinder block moment when Christian was by the steel steps and the ref was asking him if he quits, and he's like, I, I banged your mother. I was howling. I said, this man is a menace. The flaming table. So, funnily enough, when Edge set up the table, he looked back at it in a way that made me think to myself, I wonder if when he sets up a table in that spot, he always has flashbacks to the flaming spear with Mick Foley. And of course, Mick Foley hosted the buy in with Renee Paquette. And later on, Beth would come down to level Stokely, and Dax doused the table in lighter fluid and set it alight, and they had intentions of spearing Beth through the table. Luckily, at the very last moment, she got out of the way, and Cash Wheeler ended up spearing Stokely through the table. So the two of them go through the flaming table instead. But ultimately, we had dual submissions locked in on Dax. Beth pulled out Spike from underneath the steel steps, and Spike got in on the action, and Dax said, I quit. I love the fact that it was Dax who said I quit, because it was him on Collision that had me howling when he was like, I want your wives, your kids, and your dogs to hear you say I quit. And now Dax is the one to say I quit. So we have new tag team champions in Edge and Christian. I'm sorry, I will always call them Edge and Christian. And the cute moment we saw Christian accept a hug from Edge. Oh, how sweet. Next up, Kazuchika Okada defending the International Championship against Konosuke Takeshita. There was a spot on the apron where Takeshita was going for a raging fire on the apron. Okada countered, got back into the ring, and then landed a Rainmaker on Takeshita on the apron. That was pretty sick. And then later on, we see Don Callis, who was, of course, on commentary. He gets up to stop Okada from power driving Takeshita on the floor outside the ring. He wants to protect his assets, you see. And then Takeshita, well, Okada obliges. He doesn't do the power driver, but Takeshita gets up when he finally comes around and lands a brainbuster on Okada on the floor outside the ring, which is hilarious. And Don's like going crazy, like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? And Takeshita just gives him a middle finger. And I was like, oh, okay, it's happening today. There was another moment that I really loved as well, where Takeshita countered an in-progress Rainmaker from Okada and landed his own one. But ultimately, Takeshita wins with a Raging Fire. I think there was a move beforehand. I can't quite remember. I didn't note it down. But Takeshita wins the International Championship, and I was so happy. And then we see he has a bit of a thing with Don Callis where you're kind of like, are they okay? Takeshita seems a little bit annoyed, but it seems like it might be okay. But Mark Davis, Okada, Don Callis, and Rocky Romero, if I remember correctly, are all in the ring. And it's like, wait, what's going on here? Is it happening now? Is it not happening now? And then Kyle Fletcher returns. I screamed with excitement. He comes down to the ring, and essentially he kind of looks like he's standing with Takeshita. And Takeshita's smile when he sees Kyle Fletcher. Okada, Don, Rocky, Mark Davis, they leave the ring. Kyle and Takeshita hug, and I am just like, in my feelings, like, oh my gosh. He presents the championship to Takeshita, like, you won. You won. I'm like, yeah. There's a little part of me that's like, but I'm like, no. I wasn't even thinking it. I was thinking, no, I've got what I wanted. Proto Sheeta forever. They are both going to leave the Don Callis family and stay together. And then he takes out Takeshita. My heart was broken. The glee on my face, I was literally like, turned to, what the heck is going on? But you know what? Takeshita is, yeah, officially out of the Don Callis family. Proto Sheeta is done. I'm emotionally scarred. But this was my favorite match on the card because it was my favorite match. I loved the fact that this match, they gave us what they were holding out on in the C2 semi-final. This match was phenomenal. And I even loved the post match segment as much as it took me on an emotional roller coaster. That's why I loved it. There was so much in that match and in that post match segment that just made me feel so many things. But Proto Sheeta is done, and Konosuke Takeshita is a two-time international champion. I love it because that's how I found Takeshita in terms of when I started watching AEW. He was the international champion, but he is no longer part of the Don Callis family. Then we had Athena versus Mina Shirakawa in the Owen Hart Foundation quarter final match. Athena was selling a knee from early on in the match. There was a little portion outside the ring where Athena was brutalizing Mina Shirakawa, just throwing her left, right, and center. There was a moment where Mina got back into the game and I loved it. She hit a springboard enziguri and then a sling blade. I was like, ooh, we're back in the game, baby. Even though I want Athena to win the whole tournament. But I love Mina as well. And then ultimately, Mina would fall to Athena. She sold that O face, that winning O face, crazy. It was so good. I rewound it to see it again. But great match booking because there was actually spots where I believed that Mina Shirakawa might actually win this match. They made the hope feel palpable. I actually thought to myself, oh, are they going to shock us and put Mina over Athena? Because I just presumed Athena's winning, which she did, but they booked it in a way that actually allowed for some questioning and suspense as to who would actually get the victory. So Athena advances and she will meet the winner of Sari, who's in this bracket, and Sky Blue. Next up, Jon Moxley defending the Continental Championship against Kyle O'Reilly in a non-time limit match. I'll be totally honest with you, I thought I would not care for this match at all. And if I'm being frank, it's at this point that I fell asleep. I fell asleep. I wasn't watching live, had to watch the next day, but I fell asleep and I woke up during the women's four-way match. But of course, I rewound it. And you know what? I was like, I actually really enjoyed this match. Moxley sniffed out blood when it came to Kyle O'Reilly's left knee, and he was targeting it so viciously. There were some great counters and exchanges at certain points where, you know, there would be a pinfall, and then Kyle O'Reilly would slip seamlessly into a submission after Jon Moxley kicks out. At one point, they both had ankle locks in on each other at the same time. But ultimately, we see Moxley with an ankle lock, I do believe, locked in on Kyle O'Reilly, and he is trying his best to like get to the ropes, but Moxley has got him locked in the center of the ring, and ultimately Kyle O'Reilly taps out. But yeah, really, really great match. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. Next up, Samoa Joe versus Will Ospreay in the Owen Hart Foundation quarterfinal. Samoa Joe, the way he came out on his entrance, I said, oh, for a little moment, I was like, Joe's kind of fine, you know, like the energy, I was digging it. But he's in the ring posturing, and Will Ospreay comes for his jugular, hits him with an Oscar out the gate before he can even finish all of his posturing, you know. One of the moments that I loved was Samoa Joe noping another cutter and then landing a senton on Will Ospreay. And then we saw Will Ospreay hit a Styles Clash on Samoa Joe. I said, hey, okay, not you getting Samoa Joe up for a Styles Clash, which Joe kicked out of. Then there was a spot where Joe hit a snap power slam. It was a thing of beauty. I said, oh, what did I write here? My notes actually say Joe's snap power slam is gorgeous. But ultimately, two hidden blades get the job done, and Samoa Joe loses, Will Ospreay wins and advances to the semi-finals of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament, where he will meet the winner of Jack Perry and Mark Davis. Loved this match between Samoa Joe and Will Ospreay. Really, really loved it. Next up, we had Bandido versus Swerve in another Owen Hart Foundation tournament quarterfinal. First of all, can we give Bandido a shout out for his ring gear? He looked amazing. Now, he always looks cold, but I really loved this black and gold ring gear. The gold boots, the mask. I said, Bandido, yes, you are really Bandidoing. And there was a moment where he was channeling his inner Brody. Do you remember the time that he came out with Brody's jacket and chain? Ooh, ooh, ooh. Bandido is super cute when he does that, but he was on the apron. Swerve was set up on a chair by the barricade, and Bandido hits like a running, flipping senton onto Swerve. That was pretty cool. They showed it from like an aerial angle. It looked very, can I even speak? It looked very, very, very sick. There was a moment where Swerve balanced on Bandido's shoulders, held it for a couple 2 seconds, hit a house call, standing on Bandido's shoulders. Then he went for a swerve stomp to follow up straight away. Bandido kicked out, but that whole spot on Bandido's shoulders, I said, wow, this is insane. That was so good. We saw Swerve kick out of a 21 plex later on in the match, but Bandido had hit it from the new way he hits it when they're on the floor. I get annoyed that they have to do such an extra setup for a 21 plex. So when it showed itself later on in the match, I was like, what are we doing here, please? But Swerve countered the 21 plex while he was on the ropes into a vertebreaker and then hit a house call to beat Bandido and advance to the semi-finals of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Bandido and Swerve, great stuff. Listen, that spot on the shoulders, I can't stop thinking about that. That was fantastic. But Swerve will now meet the winner of, who's in this bracket here? Am I going to remember? Brody King and Claudio Castagnoli. So we'll see how it goes. But at the moment, it looks like it's on track for a Swerve and Will Ospreay final at Forbidden Door. Then came Tekla defending her AEW World Championship against Jamie Hayter, Chris Statlander, and Hikaru Shida. First of all, shout out to Tekla and Chris Statlander's face paint. I loved it. And I really liked Hayter's one-piece gear. But at the start of the match, it was kind of like, oh, you think we're done bees, yeah? So all three of them targeted Tekla at once, trying to take her out. There was a spot in a sequence in the middle of the match, somewhere in the middle, but it was basically Tekla hitting a spider suplex on Stat from the turnbuckle as she does it. And then Shida hit a knee on Tekla. And then Hayter hit a suplex to Shida, and the sequence just kept on going and going and going until all four women were laid out on the mat. I said, ooh, action. Loved it. And then we see Tekla in her spider pose. I love how Stat just snatched her up into the Saturday Night Fever that they call Sunday Night Fever because it was on a Sunday. We also saw Shida and Stat finally break down. So Hikaru Shida landed an inadvertent knee on Chris Statlander. When Chris Statlander recuperated and got back in the ring, she confronted Shida and they argued a little bit back and forth. And then Shida just said, yeah, bun this, started decking Statlander, and they just started going at it. All bets are off. And then we see Stat hit the Sunday Night Fever on... Wait, who did she hit it on? Did she hit it on Tekla? I didn't put that in my notes. Shame. I think she hit it on Tekla. She had Tekla pinned. And then Hikaru Shida comes and whacks her with a kendo stick to break up the pinfall. And then Tekla lands, was it a stomp? On Chris Statlander, and baby girl Chris Statlander gets pinned again. I was a bit sad to see that. I don't know, man. I, I love Stat. I actually really love her new look. And I loved seeing her get a reception because she was kind of in her backyard by them being in New York. But it was sad to see her get pinned again. But yeah, Tekla retains the AEW World Championship. I'm not mad at it at all because I do love me some of the Toxic Spider. And I guess the cool thing is that she retained without the help of Sisters of Sin. But I guess technically in a four-way, do you need outside interference when you can do underhanded things legally anyway? But yeah, Tekla retains and she is still running the division with her toxic ways. Oh my gosh, Stadium Stampede. Now, let me try and recall the names. We had Jericho, Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, Jack Perry, Kenny Omega, Nick Jackson, Matt Jackson versus Ricochet, Bishop Khan, Toa Leona, David Finlay, Clark Connors, Andrade, and Mark Davis. A 7-on-7 Stadium Stampede. Ooh. This match delivered in so many ways. So I've got a long list of notes here. So let me just go through them bit by bit. The entrance vignettes were really, really cool. I loved that, especially the face entrance vignettes with like the names, like the movie style. Kenny Omega looked so cool with the cigar and then him choking and them all laughing at him. That really popped me. And then in the match, the first moment that really made me giggle was Kenny playing Matador with his cape while Ricochet was in one corner and he was doing this and each face was just going to attack Ricochet. And then we had Andrade hit 3 amigos on Jack Perry. That was a little Eddie moment. Always loved that, like I was saying earlier with Bandido. Mark Davis hit a power driver on Bobby Lashley, I believe it was, on the chair. I said crazy. It's always crazy when you see Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin getting, thrown about. But of course, Mark Davis is a big boy, so he can make that happen. Toa Leona hit a triple Samoan drop on the Bucks and Perry. That man is out of this world. I need to see Toa Leona and Bobby Lashley again in a match. Their match before was so good. But yeah, triple Samoan drop from Toa Leona to Jack Perry and the Bucks. And then I think it was Toa who had an abdominal stretch on Kenny Omega in the ring. He reaches out and Ricochet holds him. And then I can't remember the order of it, but basically all of the heels pull down the ramp, even the dogs and Andrade and whatnot, to the point that they all have this leverage on Toa Leona, who has Kenny Omega in an abdominal stretch. It was so funny. And then you just see MVP come in with his stick, with his cane, like, and breaks it up by hitting Ricochet. I've got a note here that says Rana's everywhere. I think the faces had the heels like on 4 separate corners, and it was just Rana after Rana after Rana after Rana. I've got a note here that says Table is a paid actor. I can't remember who set up the table, one of the Bucks. They were going to put David Finlay through it, and the table just like, the legs just... Anyway, let's move on. Backstage, we see Gates of Agony and the Hurt Syndicate brawling out. That was, I think, our first backstage element of the Stampede. And Lio Rush pops up. You just see like Bobby Lashley looking like, what's going on? And Lio Rush is there like, doing his thing. It's so funny. And then he ends up jumping, I think, onto Toa Leona or Bishop Khan, one of them. We then see the Bucks and the Dogs fighting it out in the merch stand. And one of the Bucks hits a belt shot on one of the Dogs. And I thought, how cool, like, whoever gets to buy that particular merch belt, it's pretty cool to be like, yeah, this was used in the Stadium Stampede. Then we cut back and we see Andrade doing up a photo in the middle of a Stadium Stampede. Come to find out it's Luchasaurus in a wig. And he missed Andrade, Luchasaurus with his mask and his blonde wig. We see Jack Perry and Mark Davis fighting in catering. And then we get Kenny throwing Andrade into Satnam Singh, who I'm actually not familiar with, but this guy is massive. Hey, I say, yeah. Andrade, if I was you, I would just be, taking my leave right now. But it ended up in a crazy food fight in catering. Then Then we had a shopping cart super kick. So I think it was Nick who sent somebody, was it Clark Connors? He sent down the ramp in a cart, and then he got super kicked by the other Buck. Also, at this moment in my note, I said the Bucks outfit. They looked fantastic. I loved their outfit, like the waistcoats as well, with like the lightning kind of like design. But yeah, they looked amazing. Toa Leona nearly took out Clark Connors, his own partner, in like the hype of it all. I don't know where, I haven't got this in my notes, but somewhere in there, you know, the Mark Davis Luchasaurus? No, sorry, Mark Davis Jack Perry spot where Mark Davis comes out with a bandage on his head. He sees a note that says "wait here" or something, and then Jack Perry comes in with the bus that Luchasaurus normally drives, and it looks like Mark Davis might have been hit. You've got Tony Schiavone there, like, oh my gosh, Mark Davis was in there. Mark Davis was in there. It's like, Tony, stop. He wasn't in there. And we find out he wasn't because we see him back in the Stampede. But there's a really cool video that's going on social media where you can see one of the fans in the rafters. They saw it live. They shot that moment live. I said, big up to AEW for doing that. I think I saw a tweet from the Bucks later that said everything was live, everything was shot live except for the vignettes, like the entrance vignettes. But yeah, that wasn't in my notes. I had to make sure I mentioned that. Ricochet and Jericho were backstage using rackets, and then Luther comes out with a massive tennis racket to give to Jericho, and then Jericho's got like a tennis ball machine that's just dashing these balls at Ricochet, and they're going at it backstage. And then we had like a segment with loads of table spots. Table spot, table spot, table spot, table spot, table spot. And it was capped off with Kenny Omega delivering a one-winged angel to Andrade through a table off the apron. And then we get Ricochet being mauled by finishers, super kicks, spears, power knees, all sorts of things. But ultimately, Bishop Khan comes in to take the bullet for Ricochet. He eats a 7-way super kick. I said, "Ooh, that could not have been nice. Your head just getting licked off from all directions 7 times." And then Jericho hits a lion salt and pins Bishop Khan for the victory. So he still hasn't pinned Ricochet to my knowledge. So I'm guessing this feud might not be all the way over. But yeah, Bishop Khan took the bullet for Ricochet. Jericho got the thumbs up from the Hurt Syndicate, and he honored Sabu by throwing himself through a table. I've seen a little bit of division over, if that was good or not, because he kind of recovered so quickly. So it kind of, showed that table spots don't actually hurt. Listen, let's take that out of it. I just found it sweet in the moment that he was honoring Sabu. But yes, this Stadium Stampede match was finally the main event. Darby Allin defending the AEW World Championship against Maxwell Jacob Friedman. And if Maxwell Jacob Friedman did not win that championship, he was going to get shaved bald. Baldy. Now, when Max made his entrance, there was like a barber set up by the ramp with some clippers in spotlight, and you could obviously see like his hesitation and trepidation about what could happen. And then his music got cut off by Darby Allin making his entrance, but the match kicks off, and we straight away get a side headlock takeover from Darby Allin. That move has played a big part in their rivalry over the years, as we know. And then very soon into the match, like within the first minute, Darby landed so badly going through the ropes. I said, hey, yay, 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 yay. Maxwell Jacob Friedman, of course, was loving it. He got that little wry smile on his face. And there was a moment where MJF was on the apron and Darby Allin was about to hit a coffin drop to MJF, who is laid on the apron. And I said, no, I know that MJF is playing possum right here. I know it. You can kind of tell when he's about to do that move, and he moved. I was like, yay. Sorry for Darby, but yay for MJF. And then MJF lands a package power driver on the steps to Darby Allin. I said, wow, 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 wow. MJF hurt his tailbone doing that though. You could see him like really holding the tailbone. Of course, in protecting Darby. But Darby then landed a low blow when the ref was distracted and then went straight into a side headlock takeover once again. And then we had like a side headlock takeover trade off between the two of them. And then we got a trading ones count. So it was like back and forth, one, 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 one. Then it turned into twos, 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 twos. And I thought to myself, imagine if like that's how the match ended. You just got mistakenly caught on a 3 count. Boom, 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 done. Ah, hey. The exchange of the ones and twos ended in a code red by Darby Allin to MJF. He kicked out. And then there was a spot or a moment where they're both sitting on the mat at opposite ends of the ring, like leaning against the ropes, just looking at each other. And it was a really, really like good visual in this match. I think MJF had a similar moment like that in another match that I really liked. It might have been against Hangman, but we then see MJF pull the cameraman into harm's way when Darby Allin's about to come through the ropes for a dive, and the cameraman falls to the floor. One of the funniest things is later on when Taz kind of notices that the cameraman was still trying to get the shot even as he's falling to the floor, and then MJF up by the ramp, grabs the clippers and tries to shave Darby Allin's hair, but Darby counters into a guillotine submission, and then he gets MJF on the barber's table. He climbs the scaffolding. The stage setup was pretty cool. I quite liked the scaffolding that they had, but he climbs the scaffolding and he hits a bang bang homage to Mick Foley and lands a coughing drop from the scaffolding onto MJF. Darby Allin doing Darby Allin things. He came up bleeding. This was the only colour that we saw across the whole evening. Again, I think there are some restrictions in New York as to colour, so I'm guessing this must have been the hard way. Darby then passed out again. They were back in the ring, I think, at this point. I say he passed out, but you know, like the moment that he had with Sammy Guevara on Collision, where he had the deathlock locked in, and then he kind of just like fell from the exhaustion. That happened again with MJF, of course, to MJF's delight. We then see him land an avalanche tombstone on Darby Allin and a side headlock takeover to regain the AEW World Championship and retain his hair. Listen, I say all the time, I wasn't the biggest fan of Darby Allin winning the AEW World Championship, but I appreciate that such a large portion of the AEW fan base wanted to see that. So I love that he had this moment, this 40-day reign. He went balls to the wall with the fences and putting his body on the line. But I cannot lie, I am so happy that MJF is back at the top of the division. And then when Taz, there was a moment on commentary where Taz was like, basically Tony Schiavone and Excalibur were kind of like doing their thing in terms of MJF. You know, I can't believe this, that, and the other. Taz is like, let me be the one to congratulate MJF. I said, thank you, Taz. Yes, that's the right thing. And then when I saw them bring out a stretcher for Darby, I said, okay, here we go. There's no way that MJF is going to let this man be stretchered out peacefully. He's going to come and posture on the stretcher. And of course, he did. And then I think he was about to like do a madness. He looked like he was going to do a madness to Darby Allin. But Kevin Knight runs out. So you're thinking, oh, he's saving the day. And then MJF runs off, hightails it down the ramp, sorry. And then Kevin Knight gets on the turnbuckle and hits a UFO splash on Darby Allin. I said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And then he dashes the stretcher and just upturns Darby Allin and he's turned heel. MJF is on the ramp applauding Kevin Knight. And I must admit, at first I was like, I don't know how I feel about this being the ending to Double or Nothing, but I'm not mad at it. I didn't expect it, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. When you don't expect something, then, you know, you can have some feelings about it at least. But yeah, Kevin Knight has turned heel on Darby Allin. At first, I was like, but why? But I thought back to Wednesday when he cut that really weird promo with Speedball and Darby Allin. And the way he even cut the promo, I said, why are you out here doing this? What's your intention? So he did say to Darby Allin, like, don't let the jet down. Don't let us down. So maybe that's why he's pissed. And he said, yeah, you didn't get the job done. Let me show you. But I'm quite excited to see Kevin Knight as a heel. I think he would have been great in the Hurt Syndicate, but the Hurt Syndicate are babyface now, aren't they? Really. But there was a moment where he and Swerve, like Swerve was getting in his ear. So maybe we see something there. We have to find out what happens with Speedball and Kevin Knight now. But yeah, that's how Double or Nothing went off the air. And there was no Jay White. I wasn't really expecting anything, but just there's always a little twinge of hope. But yeah, Double or Nothing, this was a phenomenal pay-per-view. I loved it. It was every match delivered. And I must admit, like, I struggle to watch AEW pay-per-views in one. Like I said, I fell asleep in the Jon Moxley match, woke up in the 4-way with the women, but I went back to, of course, watch it from the Moxley match and complete it. And it is a lot of wrestling to digest sometimes, but you can't be mad when the wrestling is this good. It's so good. My match of the night was Takeshita versus Okada because it was them. I wanted to see this match so badly and see a better version of what we got in the C2 last year, and that's exactly what we got. And then the post-match segment, as much as it hurt my heart and took me through a roller coaster of emotions, that's why I love it, because it made me feel something. But yeah, AEW Double or Nothing, they have set the bar high. Follow that, mother effer. Hit the comments. Let me know what you thought of Double or Nothing. What was your favorite match? What was your favorite moment? And if you liked this video, please like this video, subscribe, hit the bell so that you don't miss an upload. And I will see you in the next one.